Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the HEARTS Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith. And today, listeners, I'm excited to tell you that I've got a returning guest, Janine Wirth. She's a psychotherapist, hypnotherapist, and coach. And we've had her on before, and I'm so excited to welcome her again. Janine, warm welcome to you.
Thank you so much for having me back. I'm excited to be here.
You're very welcome. And today, listeners, we're going to be talking about boundaries, because I think this is a very, very important topic in any life situation, not just love, dating and relationship scenarios, but, a sort of guide for life and living your life scenario with engaging in any relationship. What do you think, Janine?
I absolutely agree. And I think it's something that a lot of people overlook, especially in the beginning of a relationship when everything is still fluttery butterflies and the honeymoon phase. But I think it's very important to set the tone of a relationship right from the beginning.
So if you're dealing with somebody and it's obvious, that the boundaries has been an issue for them, Janine, what's your sort of first, I suppose, introduction to how you go about explaining what boundaries are and why they're necessary?
Well, I think it's very important to start setting boundaries in the dating phase already, because that way the person you're getting into a relationship with knows that you are someone who considers boundaries to be important. You can't put up with things or tolerate things or invite things into your life in the dating phase. And then as soon as you're in a committed relationship, say, okay, well, this is not okay, or this actually bothers me, because you've set that expectation for the other person. It's almost like false advertising in my mind. If punctuality is important for you, you need to make that clear from the beginning. So the person knows, okay, if I'm going to be late, I need to let this person know because this is important to her. You can't just all of a sudden have this personality change as soon as the relationship becomes serious. And I think a lot of people are too scared in the beginning to say what their boundaries are or what they consider to be non-negotiables, in fear of rejection, or thinking this guy is okay if only, the being late is just a common excuse. It's something that's easy, but it's also one of my own pet peeves, So when I was dating my husband, I let him know from the beginning that if he's going to be late, I need to know that. And that was a wonderful thing, because now, when we've been together almost 14 years, if he's running late, he will send me a message saying 15 minutes late, 20 minutes late. I don't need a long explanation, and I actually don't care why he's late. I just need to know, because it's that consideration for my time. I value my time highly. And he knows that. So when he lets me know that he's going to be 15 minutes late, I can adjust, and I don't feel that he's disrespecting me, and when people don't make that clear in the beginning, it can lead to problems later on, because it'd be like, well, the whole entire 6 months before this wasn't an issue, and now all of a sudden it's an issue, kind of thing, where it's actually been an issue the entire time. People just don't have the guts to speak up.
Yeah, and it's going to raise its head at some point, like you say, because, for the person, such as in your great example there about, somebody being punctual is important to you, and you consider it to be and your time to be valuable. I suppose if you hadn't voiced that at the start, that resentment would be continuing, wouldn't it, right through to the point, like you say, once you get sort of serious in the relationship, where you're either going to lose your temper, get angry, and then it's going to come out in a whole big love truth bomb, isn't it? At some point, rather than, like you say, addressing it right at the start.
And I think that would be so unfair to the other person, because it's coming back to that false advertising thing. All of a sudden now it's an issue, and this person's like, what's going on here? Why are you behaving like this? Because eventually, when we put up that show or that front, or pretend that things are okay when they're actually not, you can only keep that up for so long, and then the wheels come off, and it's usually not very pretty when they do. And the other person can then feel like they are being attacked unnecessarily, or that, you're being not unrealistic, but you're being overly dramatic or something like that, because they don't expect that from you. Where with my husband, he knows that I value my time, and I expect him to let me know when he's late, just as I return that favor to him, because he's also very busy. He's a director in a huge company. So we respect each other's time, because we know both of us value that. But that conversation first needs to be had. And I think the dating phase is such a wonderful time to do that, because you're getting to know each other. It's normal to be discussing topics, to be asking questions. And that's part of that getting to know that person process. But people have to have the courage to step up and say, this is not okay for me. And, to do it in a calm setting, preferably, and explain why that's not okay for you. Because when the other person understands that and it makes sense to them, it's a lot easier for them to actually keep that in mind and to stick to whatever it is that is a non-negotiable for you.
Yeah, and I do feel it is a really good example, because I know in some cultures, it is okay to be blasé about time. I actually know this from doing my own trainings in personal development. You get people that are usually fit into two different categories: those that are very punctual and very on time all the time. And see that as a must for them, because it is just part of their character and nature. And other people that, they're very laid back and time isn't an issue. And there are whole cultures and nations that are like that, in one camp or the other. So like you say, if you are somebody that gets peed off, shall we say, if somebody's late because you feel it's not respecting your time. It's not sometimes that the other person is not respecting your time. It's just that there are probably that character or nature or from that culture where it isn't a big deal for them.
Yeah, it's not a priority to them. And everybody has the right to decide what is a priority for them. But it's also your duty to communicate when it is, so that the other person is prepared and doesn't get caught off guard, or is unknowingly upsetting you or peeing you off, as you said earlier, because that might not be their intention at all. So it's a responsibility of the person to say, you know what, I get worried if you don't let me know that you're going to be late. Your route home is a very busy, accident-prone stretch. I need to know, when do I send someone out to go and look for you, kind of thing. You almost make sort of light of it if it's a difficult subject for people to discuss, but you can say, it's important to me that I know if you're going to be late.
Absolutely. And I think what is important, like you say, is to have these boundaries set at the start during the dating phase, because we can sort of be reluctant, like you say, to rock the boat, because we might think that it might put the other person off. But actually, what I found is if you address these things at the start, men are, and I'm assuming women too, but I'm going to speak from myself as a woman, respect the fact that you've said something. They want to know how to please you for the most part. And if they've inadvertently done something, like you say, in terms of maybe being late and didn't realise that was something that would upset you, they actually respect that, and unfortunately, I think we can build up fears in our minds about rocking the boat when actually it's not necessarily anything to worry about at all. from their point of view once it's been addressed.
And I think it comes back to the concept of high value behavior.
Yes.
You need to treat the person that you have a relationship with as a respected colleague. A lot of people, when they start dating or they have been together for a long time, they get so comfortable that the respect part sometimes is lacking, and I always think to myself, if I wouldn't treat a respected colleague like this, then I shouldn't be treating my partner like that. So obviously we want to have that feeling of intimacy and knowing that person, but the respect factor, I think, is always something to look at, because when that person, whether it's me or my husband, when we don't feel respected, that brings up a whole thing of issues. Because if this is your person, the person who always has your back, who you want to spend the rest of your life with, the first person you want to tell your good news to, and that you expect to share your life with, the respect, I think, has to be there.
Most certainly. And I also feel it's important to set boundaries, because you treat people how to treat you, don't you?
Yes.
And if you accept unacceptable behavior, you're almost condoning that behavior, and then you're setting yourself up to receive that behavior as a lesson for you to learn, I suppose, continuously from that point on, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, the way I look at it is, if I allow someone to disregard my boundaries and I don't speak up for myself, in that moment, I'm not choosing myself. I'm not standing up for myself. I'm not speaking my truth. And when that becomes a pattern of behavior, it becomes a big problem, because it seems like something small, but all of those small decisions, all those small times of actively not speaking up for ourselves, they add up. And that can affect the quality of our lives and relationships quite dramatically, because either you become really angry or resentful, and that affects the quality of the relationship, or you fall into people-pleasing habits and behaviors, which is going to wreak havoc in your life. You will get to the point where you're so burnt out and just angry with people, because you will feel that everything that you value, everything that you stand for, is just being disregarded.
And I think it's important to mention that if anybody is listening and they can relate to this, that it's not your fault. Quite often we tend to, once we become aware of this, think, oh my God, I've been engaging in all this behavior, but it's not your fault. If you didn't have the awareness around this previously, then just know we've all had to learn these lessons. And, it's now about choosing yourself, setting yourself your own standards and boundaries of what you do think is acceptable or unacceptable, and communicating that from this point on.
Yeah. And can you really have a high value, intimate relationship with someone if you can't even speak your truth about your boundaries?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I can remember, being in previous relationships where I've accepted what I now look back on as unacceptable behavior, such as, somebody really being unfairly irritable or angry with me for no reason. And it getting to the point where there's some verbal abuse being held my way, and me thinking I was being the bigger person for forgiving that. But actually, I was disrespecting myself when I look back in that situation by not having the boundaries up and saying, you know what, this isn't acceptable. In my head, I was justifying it, in terms of, well, let me be the bigger person in this situation and forgive that behavior, when actually all it did was condone it. And you end up getting more of it. And then ultimately, that isn't acceptable, and it comes to an end.
Look, I'm not saying that people don't have bad days. Everyone can have a bad day, and it can be like a once off. And after that person has calmed down, it is then your responsibility to say, I understand that you had a bad day today for whatever reason. Just remember that when you are having a bad day, I'm not your verbal punching bag. I'm not going to be your whipping horse. So if you feel that you cannot speak calmly or in a respectful manner, then I would suggest that you rather go out for a walk. You can tell that person in that moment, I understand you're upset right now, but I'm going to go and read a book, or I'm going to go listen to some music. Actually physically go to another area of the house or another room and say, I'm going to go there. And once you've calmed down and you can speak to me in a respectful manner, come find me. So you're setting that boundary, you're giving that person space to feel their feelings, which I think is important, but you're not falling into that behavior where that person can just treat you like crap and get away with it.
Okay, so what's the conversation to have with somebody that has crossed that boundary? Because like you say, people have bad days. Sometimes they have maybe had a history of anger issues, from their past childhood or previous relationships where, hurt people, don't they? So how can we help somebody heal from that without, like you say, being their verbal punching bag at a time where they're taking it out on you when it's obviously something that's been triggered in them that isn't anything to do with you?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, as adults, each of us have a responsibility for our behavior, and we should know what our triggers are. And if it does happen that we get triggered or we have this acutely bad day, that we accept the responsibility. Okay, I feel angry or I feel this, so I'm going to find a healthy way to cope with this. And for some people, it could be going for a run, where they need that physical release. For other people, it could be listening to calm music to calm their nervous system down, whatever that is. But it's up to each person to identify that, okay, I should not be around people at the moment in the state that I'm in, and taking that responsibility to go and do something to calm themselves down. A lot of people don't have the self-awareness to recognize that and to actually see past their own emotions and saying, okay, I should not be around people right now until I've calmed down. And the only way that we can make people aware of that is to tell them, listen, I can see you're very upset at the moment, and rightly so, whatever that might be. I think that you need some time alone, or I think that you should, go ride your bicycle, whatever, helps that person to calm down, and making them aware of it, that they need that time out. It's almost like with children. When children throw tantrums, they're so in it, they don't care about their behavior. And at that age, they also don't know. But adults that weren't parented in a way to actually feel their feelings in a calm way, or to go and remove themselves from a situation to make themselves feel better in a healthy way, the partner then has to say, listen, it looks like you're really upset. Perhaps you should go for a walk. Or perhaps, I could run you a nice bath. Be supportive, but in a way where you're not being attacked by that person, or not being made to feel less than, or, accepting abusive behavior because of that person's mood. That is a boundary that everybody should have, where it's like, yes, I'm here, I can help you, I can suggest things, I can do things for you, but I'm not going to take verbal or physical or any type of abuse because you're having a bad day.
Great advice. And another piece of great advice I heard was from Oprah Winfrey. She said, she has this 17 seconds rule, whereby she'll be quiet for 17 seconds and think to herself in those 17 seconds, is this issue going to matter to me in a week's time, in a month's time, in a year's time, in 5 years' time? And until she gets to a point in a future forecasting where she can say no.
Yes.
Then
in therapy, we call it the 5-for-5 rule.
Yeah.
Where if it's not going to matter in 5 years' time, we don't spend more than 5 minutes on that issue. We can feel our emotions and be upset for 5 minutes, and then we have to say, okay, it's this concept of having 5 bad minutes in the day and then actually milking it for the entire day. It's like, was it really a bad day or was it a bad 5 minutes? Because sometimes when we spiral and we go down that rabbit hole of emotions and we start feeling sorry for ourselves and the world is so terrible and everyone is against us and everybody sucks, and it's very easy to fall into that spiral, especially when it's someone who doesn't have a lot of self-awareness, who doesn't see the bigger picture when they are in that zone. So I teach my clients the 5-4-5 rule, which is, if it's not going to matter in 5 years, you don't spend more than 5 minutes on it. And that changes the way people think about things. If someone cuts you off in traffic, yes, that's a douchebag move. Are you now going to have a bad day about it? Only if you choose to, because in 5 years, that guy cutting you off is not going to matter. But if you whine about it the whole day, then your whole day is going to suck. Or you can say, that was a douchebag move, whatever, I'm going to let it go, and then get on with your day. You can still then have a good day, but you have to make that decision. And it's that point of making the decision where a lot of people fall short. They just fall into that spiral. And from there, the whole day is just ruined.
Yeah, and that's the truth. So like you said there, that it's not about suppressing what emotion comes up, because obviously if you start suppressing what emotion comes up, that can have a negative impact on your physical and mental health as well, can't it? So it's allowing yourself to have that negative emotion, but in a healthy way, but not to the point where it ruins your whole day.
Yeah. So the process of that is identify the feeling that you're feeling. I feel upset because this guy just cut me off for no reason. Acknowledge, yes, I feel upset because that's really bad behavior and it's dangerous. It can endanger his life. It can endanger my life. It's really not how responsible drivers behave. And then to release it, think about, okay, that was a douchebag move. Obviously, he's having a bad day. Does his action have to control my reaction for the whole day? No, it doesn't. I can choose to say douchebag and get on with my day. That is the process. And a lot of people just identify and then react. That choice, acknowledging and making the choice, they fall short on that step.
And also we can make it a self-fulfilling prophecy for ourselves, can't we? Because if we allow that one incident, like you say, if somebody cuts you up in traffic, to ruin our whole day, and actually sort of voice that to ourselves, like, oh, this is a bad day, then that's what actually plays out, because we've just put that out there, haven't we, and focusing on it.
Exactly. If your friend, you have to put yourself in the mind of a friend. If your friend had to tell you that story, you'd be like, oh, that was awful. But you're not going to let them whine about it the whole day. You're going to say, oh, yeah, that's awful. That happened to me before. Or, people should be more responsible. And then you're going to get on with the conversation. You're not going to let them go, put up a tent and spend the whole day on that conversation. And we need to do that for ourselves, as have that self-awareness to think, okay, obviously I'm not going to now hop on about it for the next 8 hours. I'm going to have my little 5 minutes, and then after that, I'm going to move on.
How do we help our clients then? What do you do specifically? I know obviously what I do, but when you have somebody come to you, Janine, and it's obvious they've got no boundaries whatsoever, to identify what boundaries would be healthy for them to put in place, and then to actually have the confidence to voice those.
Okay. Often when I speak to people about boundaries, they themselves are not sure what their boundaries should be, but they do know what they don't want. So we start with the point of, okay, what don't you want? And then from there, I can help them identify a boundary. And then we have that role-playing conversation where I say, okay, if your boss phones you at 9 p.m. on a Saturday night, how can you react to that? How can you respond to that? Because we are responsible for for training people how they treat us. If your contract says that you work 40 hours a week and Saturday night, 9 o'clock is not in that time schedule, and it's not a dire emergency, because obviously every now and again there are exceptions to all of our rules. If that is a normal constant behavior, we then need to put a boundary in place and have that conversation. But we first have to identify what is the behavior that we don't want to allow. Just because your boss sends you that message at 9 p.m. doesn't mean you have to answer at 9 p.m. Or can you answer at 8 o'clock on Monday morning, and defining what is okay and what is not okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the context of dating then, what would you say to somebody that's had poor dating experiences and is frightened to communicate because they're not somebody that likes or is worried about confrontation? How would you answer them in terms of how you could help them?
Okay, so usually I would look at the situation that has upset them. So say, for example, let's take something easy. Say, for example, the person that they're dating sends them a text message and they're very busy and they only respond an hour later, and that upsets the other person. Why did you take so long to respond? Or why are you ignoring me? I want you to answer immediately. These are sort of red flags where you can see, okay, that's not normal. If you are at work and you are busy, the person you're dating doesn't get to demand when you respond to something, because when you are at work, your time belongs to your company or your boss or the job at hand. And you can say to that person, all right, when I'm at work, I respond when and as I have time. And if you're not okay with that, then this is going to be a problem, because we have a no cell phone policy in our office, or whatever the case may be. It's just a simple example. But you have to then make that person realize, I don't sit and hang on my phone the whole day waiting for you to message me. I'm busy. I'm at work. If I have time, maybe in my lunch break, I will respond. If I'm in a meeting, I'm not going to respond, and create those realistic expectations. Because if you're in a relationship with someone who thinks that the minute they send you something, you have to drop everything, even if you're in a meeting or whatever, that's an unrealistic expectation. And you will never be able to meet that, because real life just doesn't allow for it. That would be a point where you can speak up and say, if I'm in a meeting and our cell phones are off, I'm not going to respond immediately. I won't even see your message until I put my phone on. If this is going to be an issue for you, then either you need to change your expectation or you need to start dating someone else. I mean, you have to speak up, because if you don't, and you always try and go out of your way to respond as quickly as possible, you are busy teaching that person that is normal behavior for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
The minute that you can't do it, they're going to get upset, because now you've built up this expectation and you're not meeting it. So it's very important right from the beginning, when something like that happens, to say, this is what is realistic for me. I know just because I send my husband a message, he might be in a meeting, and that's great, because that's his job. He's doing his job. If he doesn't respond immediately, just the same way he can't expect me to respond immediately. I'm now in a podcast with you. Does that mean that I'm now going to stop and say, hey, Lyn, can you stop recording? I need to respond to this message. No, he has to wait. And that is a really realistic expectation, But those conversations need to be had as they come up, because that way you can deal with it while it's still a small thing. The longer you leave it, the bigger of an issue it's going to be down the road. Yeah.
And as I said before, I don't think that guys don't necessarily expect you to say that. I've found it to be quite surprising when I've stated my boundaries, that they actually do highly respect that, what my boundaries are. And, even those boundaries where they've probably not initially liked it, they've still said, you know what, when you said that, I really respected what you said, once they'd had time to think about it.
Yeah.
Even if they didn't initially like it, you know what I mean?
But that's a sign of a healthy person in a healthy relationship, because if that person cannot deal with you speaking your truth or making them aware of your boundaries, then that's a big red flag, and they're probably not the person that you want to be in a relationship with, because you will never be able to speak your truth.
I mean, even a situation like I think I can remember a time early in a relationship, I was still seeing another guy, for example, and my then future boyfriend was upset that I was still seeing this other guy, but we weren't exclusive. It was early days in our relationship, and I said, well, this for me isn't a serious relationship yet, and until you want it to, make it clear to me that you do want us to be exclusive, I'm still gonna, see this other guy. And he didn't like it. I could tell he didn't like it. But you know what? Afterwards, he did say he respected me for that. For me, forcing him to, I suppose, step up to the plate if he wanted a serious monogamous relationship. From that point onwards, it made him think, do I want to be with this woman? And commit to that. And it shaped then our future relationship, for us to be that exclusive relationship.
Well, that's the thing, you set the tone and the expectation. It's like, I can be exclusive with you if you want to be exclusive, but you have to step up and say that. And until you do, we're not exclusive. And that's the reality of the situation, and give him the choice. It's his choice then, whether he wants to step up and say, I want us to be exclusive or not. And it's your choice to respond to that or not. And I think that often people forget that we have this responsibility to speak up, and we also have the choice to accept or deny, and to walk away. I think people are so scared of being alone that they accept behaviors that they really aren't comfortable with just because they're scared to walk away.
I 100% agree. And as we've said all along, when we've been speaking during this conversation, we do treat people how to treat us by what we accept or don't accept, don't we? And that's the sad thing, that we have to really look at ourselves in these scenarios. And if we have been treated poorly in the past, what has been our part that we've played in it?
Exactly. And that can extend to every single relationship in your life. I mean, we have a no phone rule at our dinner table, and everyone sticks to it. My husband, my children, and they all know that this is a rule because we've discussed it. And we said, we don't spend a lot of time together, but when we are together and we're having dinner together, we are fully present, which means that we don't use our phones at the dinner table. Dinner doesn't last for 5 hours. It's maybe half an hour, 45 minutes where we are really connecting on a deep level. But if we allowed people to use their phones during dinner, we wouldn't have that. So that is then a rule. And we as the parents also stick to it, because it's something that is for the good of the entire family. So we all stick to it. And that is really helpful because we explained and said, what? Most of the time you're at school and we're at work. So when we are together, we're going to say during these 30 to 45 minutes, we're not going to use our phones. And everyone understands it and agrees with it. And it's easy. We don't even have to discuss it. It just is. And that's why it's so important to set these boundaries and to have these discussions right at the beginning of the relationship. Because once you've put up with it, especially if it's been a couple of months or even a few years, it's very difficult to turn back the clock and say, okay, actually, this is not okay for me.
Yeah, 100% agree. And also, I love what you said about, the dinner table rule and being an example and a role model for that as parents. And knowing that almost if you set the boundaries right from the start in the early days of any relationship, then ultimately down the road, because those boundaries have been set, you actually don't need boundaries at some point because you know what those are. So actually you're all automatically sticking to them, aren't you?
Yes, and I see this a lot, before, when we went out to dinner, before the restaurant shut down, and that whenever we went out to dinner, you would then see couples sitting there, each busy with their phone and not even looking at each other. And I always thought to myself, what is the point? Why did they even go out for dinner if they're just going to sit and actively ignore each other? Is what is happening on their phones, if that is so much more interesting than having a conversation with the person that is right there with you, then maybe you're with the wrong person, because if that person is so boring that you cannot concentrate on them for an hour, then maybe that's a sign that you need to find someone who's more interesting or who can hold your attention. And my husband, he would often get calls and messages and whatever, and I just say to him, listen here, if you're going to sit on your phone, then I can stay home, or I can rather go out with a friend. But if I'm with you and you're on your phone, you give me the impression that I'm boring, or that what is happening on your phone is more interesting, or it means more to you than my time, and I value my time. I can also spend it otherwise. And he immediately stopped doing that, because he was like, actually, this time with my wife means more than answering this message or checking this email. And that was a way to let him know that when I'm with him, I expect to have his attention just as he has mine.
Love that.
A realistic expectation,
I love that, because I do absolutely 100% agree with you around, when you go out for a meal with somebody and you see other people, actively, like you say, distracting themselves on their phone. I feel like you do, that it's quite sad to see that, and that people aren't actually, actively engaging in conversations with each other. It's really sad, really sad.
Yeah.
So on that note, Janine, what is your best contact information? If any of our audience members would like to get in touch with you, what would be your best contact address?
Well, I have recently joined Instagram and I'm quite enjoying the platform. So my Instagram handle is therapist_Janine Wirth. Or on Facebook, I have a private group for women called Heal and Transform Your Life. Or my website, which is just www.janinewirth.com.
Excellent. And I'll make sure all that contact information is also included in our show notes. So thank you so much for sharing all your personal and other experiences around setting boundaries. That's been great. I'm sure our audience have got some pure gems of pure wisdom and actions that they can implement in their own lives to make sure that they've got the correct healthy boundaries in place for their future relationships. Thank you so much, Janine.
You're very welcome. It was so nice chatting with you.
And it just leaves me to say that if you've enjoyed this podcast episode, please subscribe, share and comment. We do appreciate having that so that we can reach more people across the world. So thank you so much, listeners, for listening. And it just leaves me to say, true love starts with opening our hearts. And until next time, goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group Two Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.